A name echoed through 1,000 years of history: Rome. While the empire in the west crumbled, its eastern twin persisted, a shining beacon of civilization, wealth, and Christian faith. For 10 centuries after the West fell, the world recognized only one city as the true, eternal capital, the jewel of the Seven Hills: Constantinople, the city founded by Constantine the Great. Its very existence was a challenge to the new powers rising around it, chief among them the burgeoning Ottoman Sultanate. By the mid-15th century, the Byzantine Empire, as it had come to be known, was little more than a ghost of its former glory. The city itself, still breathtaking, was a shrunken territory surrounded by Ottoman lands, the last surviving remnant of an empire that once spanned the Mediterranean. Its defenses, the colossal Theodosian walls, stood less as a guard against a rising threat and more as a stubborn monument to a vanished past, a symbol of defiance that had repelled armies from every corner of the world: Goths, Avars, Persians, Arabs, and Bulgars. The city's inhabitants, perhaps only 50,000 strong, were fewer than at any point in its history, and its final emperor, Constantine XI Palaeologus, inherited a treasury that was virtually bankrupt and an army that was critically small. Into this fractured world stepped a new force, a dynamic figure who possessed not just ambition, but the cold, calculating vision required to achieve a 1,000-year dream: Sultan Mehmed II. He was an unusual ruler, intellectual and ruthless, who spoke several languages and studied military science and history with an almost obsessive focus. When he ascended the Ottoman throne for the second time in 1451, he was barely 19 years old, yet he was determined to prove to the world, and to the skeptical old guard of his own court, that he was the master of his own destiny. Mehmed's stated goal was singular and absolute: he would take Constantinople, or he would die trying. The first step in his meticulous plan was to ensure no help could reach the city from the north. The Bosphorus Strait was the lifeline of Constantinople, linking the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Any naval aid from Venice or Genoa had to pass through this narrow choke point. The Byzantines had long relied on the existing Anatolian fortress built decades earlier on the Asian side, but Mehmed knew that one fortress was not enough. In a move that signaled his intent to the entire region, Mehmed began the construction of a massive, strategically placed new fortress on the European shore, directly across the water from the existing Anatolian fort. This new fortification, which he named Rumeli Hisari, the Fortress of Europe, was built with astonishing speed. Its 3 massive towers were designed not merely to defend, but to command the strait. With the Bosphorus now effectively sealed by a double lock, any passing ship was subject to Ottoman cannon fire. The diplomatic protests from Constantinople were met with Mehmed's chilling reply: "What the Sultan can do is to do as he likes. It is not you who built this country, but my ancestors and myself." This fortress was built in violation of existing treaties, and its completion marked the point of no return. The siege was now a matter of when, not if. Mehmed's preparations continued on an unprecedented scale, focusing primarily on artillery. Constantinople's walls were built to withstand the stone and iron balls of medieval siege engines, but gunpowder changed the rules of warfare entirely. Mehmed acquired the services of a Hungarian cannon founder named Urban, who had initially offered his expertise to the Byzantines, but had been turned away by their inability to pay. Urban set about forging a monumental cannon, known to history as the Basilica. It was a terrifying creation, a 7-ton bronze beast capable of launching a massive stone shot weighing over half a ton. Transporting this weapon, along with dozens of other heavy guns, was a logistical nightmare, requiring dozens of oxen and hundreds of men to roll it towards the city's land walls. By the spring of 1453, the overwhelming Ottoman army, estimated at somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 men, was in position outside the legendary Theodosian walls, the triple line of defense that ran across the peninsula. The defenders, led by Emperor Constantine, could muster only about 7,000 men, a desperate mix of Greek, Venetian, and Genoese troops commanded by the brilliant Genoese mercenary Giovanni Giustiniani. The siege officially began on April 6, 1453. The bombardment was immediate and relentless. Mehmed concentrated his fire on the central section of the walls, known as the St. Romanus Gate, where the terrain was less steep. Day after day, the basilica thundered, its monstrous projectiles slowly, agonizingly chipping away at the seemingly invincible fortifications. The noise and the dust were constant. The sheer spectacle of the assault was designed to break the defenders' morale as much as the stone. The first crucial test came at sea. The city's great naval defense was the massive iron chain stretched across the mouth of the Golden Horn, the deep inlet that protected the city's northern flank. The chain, supported by buoyant wooden logs and manned by Byzantine and Genoese ships, prevented any Ottoman fleet from entering the harbor. Despite the chain, on April 20th, a critical moment arrived when 4 Christian ships, 3 Genoese and 1 Byzantine, arrived from the Aegean, laden with desperately needed provisions and reinforcements. Mehmed's fleet moved to intercept them. The ensuing naval battle was a humiliation for the Ottomans. Despite their superior numbers, the smaller, taller, heavily laden Christian ships fought skillfully. They repelled wave after wave of attackers, and in a display of sheer determination, managed to slip past the blockade and reach the safety of the Golden Horn, sailing over the chain to wild cheers from the city walls. Mehmed, witnessing this defeat from the shore, was reportedly furious, even considering the execution of his own admiral. This setback was a huge morale boost for the defenders, who believed their ancient luck still held. But Mehmed was not one to be deterred by temporary failure. He was a radical thinker, and his response to the Golden Horn chain was one of the greatest military gambits in history. If his ships could not sail past the chain, he would move them over land. He ordered the construction of a massive slipway. Using thousands of workers, thick wooden rollers, and greased logs, Mehmed had a path cleared from the Bosphorus around the Genoese colony of Pira and down into the sheltered waters of the Golden Horn. In the dead of night, to the shock and utter disbelief of the Byzantines, a naval flotilla was literally wheeled across solid ground. Using ox teams, immense manpower, and even sails to help push the vessels, dozens of Ottoman ships bypassed the Great Chain and appeared as if by magic inside the harbor that the defenders had believed was impregnable. This maneuver was devastating. It forced the Byzantines to dilute their already thin forces, moving troops and resources away from the land walls to guard the now exposed sea walls along the Golden Horn. The defenders were exhausted, their resources dwindling, and their confidence shattered by this display of engineering brilliance and determination. The siege dragged on through May. The constant bombardment pulverized sections of the outer walls, and while the defenders feverishly worked through the night to repair the damage with barrels and rubble, Mehmed knew the walls were weakening significantly. Giustiniani, the Genoese commander, was the heart of the defense, organizing repairs and coordinating the desperate sallies. Mehmed also had to contend with attempts to undermine the walls, but the Byzantine engineers were able to counter the mining efforts with their own desperate tunneling. By May 26th, Mehmed, confident that the walls were sufficiently breached and his army exhausted by the prolonged effort, called a final council of war. Despite the cautions of his viziers, Mehmed, driven by prophetic dreams and his own fierce will, decreed that the final, decisive assault would begin on May 29th, 1453. He promised his men 3 days of plunder and glory, galvanizing the vast army. In the city, the mood was one of somber resignation. Emperor Constantine XI gathered his remaining nobles and soldiers in the Hagia Sophia for a final, mournful liturgy. He delivered a heroic speech, thanking those who had stood by the city and reminding them that the fate of Christianity rested on their shoulders. He then rode out to the walls, prepared to fight and die alongside his men. The final assault began in the early hours of May 29th. Mehmed launched 3 successive waves. The first wave consisted of irregular troops and auxiliary forces, designed only to exhaust the remaining defenders and dull their weapons. The second wave, composed of Anatolian troops, focused on the main breaches, fighting fiercely in the ruins of the outer defenses. The defenders held fast, relying on the genius of Giustiniani to plug the breaches. But the third wave was the decisive blow. The Janissaries, the elite, disciplined corps of the Sultan, trained from childhood to be the perfect fighting machine. They attacked the main breach with terrifying resolve. It was during this final push that a small, accidental tragedy proved fatal.
a small postern gate known as the Kirkeporta, which was used for counterattacks, had been somehow left unbolted. A few Ottoman soldiers discovered the oversight and slipped through, hoisting the Ottoman banner above the inner wall. Though quickly overwhelmed, their appearance provided a terrifying signal to the troops outside. Simultaneously, the main assault reached its climax. The Genoese commander, Giustiniani, was gravely wounded, taking a heavy shot in the chest. The sight of their most capable leader being carried away, screaming in pain, instantly shattered the morale of the Latin and Greek soldiers he led. The defense collapsed. The Janissaries poured through the main breaches. And for Constantine XI Palaeologus, understanding that the city was lost, refused to flee. He cast off his imperial regalia and, leading a final, desperate charge with his remaining officers, vanished into the swirling, brutal street fighting. His body was never definitively identified.
The fall of the city was swift and violent. Mehmed II rode triumphantly into the city later that afternoon, proceeding directly to the Hagia Sophia, the great church that symbolized Eastern Christianity. As he gazed upon the vast, soaring dome, he ordered the church consecrated as a mosque, marking the end of one religious and imperial epoch and the beginning of another. In 53 days, a 21-year-old sultan had accomplished what no army, no caliph, and no emperor had managed in over a millennium. He did not just conquer a city, he erased the last living remnant of the Roman Empire, extinguished the final claim to the Caesar's legacy, and established the Ottoman Empire as a world power that would shape the destiny of Europe and Asia for 4 more centuries. The ancient, impervious city of Constantinople was dead, and in its place, the new capital of the Ottoman world, Istanbul, was born.